I can't believe how fast this month went by. It feels like I just did my March wrap up, and now I'm filming my April wrap up. I don't want to say this has been a bad reading month. I definitely haven't read as many books as I wanted to, but the ones that I did read, I really enjoyed. I can't say that it was unexpected. After reading 10 books last month, which definitely was a fluke for me, and I knew it at the time that this wasn't going to be a common thing that I would read that many books. So I only got through 3 books this month. First being Galactic HellCats by Marie Vibbert. This is a sci-fi space opera following a girl motorcycle gang in space called the Galactic HellCats. The book feels almost episodic in nature, whereas overall story arc is focused on character development. Actual events take place in miniature arcs, such as how each individual got their flyer, how they met, how they rescued a prince, and how they outran the highly militarized planet the prince escaped from. I love the concept of a personal flyer, basically the motorbike version of a spaceship. It's really neat and something I've never really seen before in science fiction. I like that each girl comes from a different part of space as well as a different class. I think the expectation would have been that these are all people who have grown up poor and have turned to stealing as a way to get by. And while Key fits that trope to a key, we also have Zuleika, who's on the entire opposite of the spectrum and born wealthy, never needing to worry about money, and mostly she's just bored. She feels unchallenged by her life, and that's what drew her to joining a motorbike gang. And then there's Margot, who might be my favorite because she's just so unexpected. She's working class, struggling to find an honest job, and completely anxious and unwilling throughout each adventure. She's also the most trustful of police and law, which leads to some interesting situations in the book. I like the ever evolving relationships between the 4 main characters. Trust is built and destroyed constantly between characters, and they all have something that they like about another, but another thing they absolutely hate. It makes the gang's dynamic really interesting to follow and also unexpected. I don't usually like royalty main characters because they tend to deify royals as if these are people who were born good and born to be kind rulers, but Prince Thane is very much depicted as an object and victim to his ruling mother and next in line sister. It's definitely used in a way that perpetuates his home planet Ratana as a corrupted society. I can see in many ways how Vibbert reverses roles. It's a prince being rescued by women instead of the standard men rescuing princess plots. And Ratana's society treats men as these lesser, highly sexualized objects, similar to how women are treated in our society. And that detail is something I approach with caution. I think the concept can easily be done poorly, but Vibbert executes it really well. I was generally impressed. It didn't come across as, let's give men a taste of their own medicine. Look at how awful and ridiculous this behavior is, and what effect that has on someone living through it. Thane will worry about his clothes, his hair, his overall appearance, in completely irrelevant situations. But that's what it feels like, to have grown up being told that you have to look pretty and appeasing at all moments. And often his looks and charisma is all he feels he brings to the table. He's conscientious of how he speaks, and he always wants to be on the HellCats' good side, which so relatable considering women have all the power in his society. Women are in ruling roles, and his greatest expectation is to marry well. So mostly I look forward to his character development as the series continues, now that he is free from the prison of expectations he was kept in and how poorly he was being treated by the women in his family. He's also gay and had very few opportunities to explore that side of himself, which I predict he will gradually become more open about in future installments. There's only one part of the book that lost me, but only for a moment. There's a situation that I felt de-escalated too quickly. Like the HellCats were cornered by the shipfolk who seemed to value a good monetary deal over loyalty, and then the HellCats get let off too easily. Like there was good tension build up there that I don't think was fully explored. It felt a little too random how immediately their problem disappeared. I was just a little disappointed in that, but Vibbert quickly makes up for it in the next chapter with a new fun challenge and a cool new world to explore. I think we'll see more of this shipfolk in the series. At least I hope we do. Overall, I barely scratched the surface on all of the neat world building in this book, along with characterization. Those are the two strongest factors in the book, and as with every series, I must ask if I would read on. The answer here is yes. Absolutely, I'm excited even. This book I read was Sorrowland by Rivers Solomon. This was an advanced reader's copy. I somehow managed to win a Goodreads giveaway, which I was really excited about because I already knew I loved Rivers Solomon's work and was excited to get my hands on this book. So this book comes out on May 5th, and hopefully my video will be up before then. This one is a gothic fiction which blends fantasy, science fiction, and horror. It follows the character Vern, who is an albino black woman born in a cult. At the start of the book, she has escaped the cult and is living in the woods. She is pregnant by the cult's leader and gives birth to twin sons. She remains pursued by both the cult and violent visions of the past. Unable to trust the outside world, she can only depend on herself for her and her child's survival. The fictitious cult Caneland was born out of a black empowerment movement, initially offering refuge to black people in an oppressively white society. Corruption began once Eamon Fields declared himself as Reverend, turning Caneland into a religion that rejects the white devil and vilifies the outside world. What is so genius about the conceptualization of Caneland is how appealing it is. It truly comes off as a safe haven for black people in a world that is more often than not unfair to them. I completely understand why anyone would want to join Caneland, and even more, understand why Canaanites are reluctant to leave even once they discover the corruption occurring behind the overall message of black positivity. It truly seems like the lesser of two evils at points. It also effectively exposes how roles of power often leads to abuse, with the Reverend taking advantage of his spiritual superiority over everyone to make exceptionally questionable decisions and subjecting Canaanites to abuse, and even several minor male characters taking advantage of their wives and daughters. The book starts off fairly rooted in reality, so that when odd hauntings were occurring to Vern, I excused them as hallucinations or even just paranoia. She also is purposely being terrorized by someone working for Caneland, who she refers to as the Fiend, and this reality of being hunted mixed with hallucinations makes it difficult to differentiate between reality and fiction as a reader, which is brilliantly done. I also like how hauntings progressively increase in number and clarity in tandem with Vern becoming more supernatural herself, to the point where eventually she's just used to seeing ghosts constantly. And minor spoiler, but that's kind of what these hauntings actually are. She is seeing memories of people who have died, appropriately fitting the tone of the novel, which touches on how tragedies, particularly to people of color, are ignored, forgotten, and disrespected. Much of the conflict is inspired by white characters' inability to sympathize with black people, going so extreme as to suggest that black people are expendable. The things which happened to Vern and the Canaanites under the cult would not be as easily brushed aside had these characters been white. All this remains painfully relevant even to today. One of the things that almost caused me to stop reading was when Vern engages in a sexual relationship with a much older woman. At this point in the story, Vern was only 15, and upon meeting the woman and asking her age, she responds with, "Too old for you," recognizing that she knew Vern was a child, and yet encourages a continuous sexual relationship with her. I was concerned that it was going to be played off as romantic, despite the fact that there's a huge and unhealthy power imbalance in this relationship, but fortunately Solomon does expose it to be problematic. In that aspect, I kind of like that this plot was included. It was realistic to show how susceptible Vern was conditioned by her past. It's further juxtaposed when later on Vern enters a healthy relationship and narrates that people who have been abused can still find happiness. I don't see unhealthy lesbian romances in books because, let's be real, lesbian relationships alone being represented are few and far in between, but it definitely happens, so I'm happy it was included. Again, alongside with Vern eventually finding love with a girlfriend who does treat her right. There's also some neat gender stuff going on. Vern uses he/him pronouns on her children, but whether or not that is associated to the genitalia, all that is said on the matter after she gives birth is that she didn't bother looking at the genitals. The children grow up with an absence of societal expectations placed on gender. They appear confused when outsiders refer to them as a boy or a girl. They believe the person who fathered them was actually a woman Vern was close to back at Caneland. And when it comes to a woman who has done their family harm, the children refer to this character as a man, only because in Vern's bedtime stories, the person committing harm to the heroes is always referred to as a man. I like this rejection of gender and subsequent commentary on it. There is also a canonically trans character in the story as well, which supplements this plot. I absolutely devoured this book though. The intense feeling of being hunted along with the intrigue of mystery made it a hard book to put down. I did have a small issue with some technical stuff in the book. This is my first experience with an advanced reader's copy, and while it was noticeably full of minor spelling errors compared to other books I've read, I'm not sure if some of the writing I'm about to talk about would be something that would be corrected before the book's final release. Some of the efforts to explain ongoings in the book, particularly near the end, were unexpectedly clumsy. During an action scene, there is a chunk of detail that interrupts the intense flow of action, as well as contains what felt like a jump to conclusions on Vern's part. Like, it felt inorganic, as well as Vern is supposed to be running for her life. Why would she have taken time to think about this long enough for her to make a conclusion that wasn't obvious to me as a reader? And later on, when she absorbs another character's memories, the book takes a chapter-long detour to explore these memories, which are relayed in a way as if I were reading like a wiki article on the character, like 10 pages long of straight exposition. I would have expected it to have been relayed more like snapshot memories or just better incorporated than it was. I think this only really stood out to me because it felt uncharacteristic of Solomon's writing. It's usually well put together and beautiful, so mostly it came across as rushed or still stuck in a draft. Overall, it didn't ruin my enjoyment of the novel. And the last book I read is Victories Greater Than Death by Charlie Jane Anders. First of all, I'm gonna need you to look at how pretty this cover is. Especially, like the inner artwork. This was one of my most anticipated releases for 2021, as stated back in my 2020 year wrap-up. So I went in with relatively high expectations. Charlie Jane Anders has become an autobi author for me. Pretty much I'd read anything by her. Victories Greater Than Death is a young adult science fiction space opera. Main character Tina knows that she is a clone of a great alien hero, and at the start of the book she is waiting for her rescue beacon to light up to begin her destiny to save the universe. Along with the high expectations of her birthright, she also inherits a powerful enemy, Morant, an interstellar serial killer bent on genocide, and he is not pleased to learn that Tina is back from the dead. I struggled a bit at the start to get into it. I think because it starts on Earth and we're introduced to the mundane at first to understand where Tina came from. Parts felt underwhelming and left me questioning if I was going to enjoy the rest of the book, But thankfully I stuck with it because at about 50 pages in, my interest started to pick up. And I ended up really enjoying this book. I almost wish the book begins with Tina's beacon lighting up, but that's just me who prefers to start in the middle of action. Not only does the beginning establish Tina's background as a normal Earth citizen who knows she's destined to be a hero, it also puts the reader in her mindset. Like, while reading it, I was thinking, I just want to go to space already. I don't need to know any of these Earth connections she has because they won't matter once she's in space, which is probably exactly what Tina was feeling. I don't love Chosen One plots usually. The concept of only one person can be the hero adds the unfair pressure to the character as well as excuses literally everyone else from needing to act. I could tell going into this one that the book was going to challenge the stereotypes of this trope. At the start, I love that Tina already knew her destiny and that she was impatient to start it. She's insecure when she doesn't measure up to who she's supposed to be, and ultimately her storyline becomes about carving out her own identity. And while her actions are noble, none of it is without help from the rest of the crew, and her success depends on their expertise and willingness to do the right thing. It relays the idea that it takes more than one person to make change. It makes all the supporting characters equally as important and motivated as Tina is. With such a large cast of characters, I'm really impressed with how fleshed out everyone was. I never read straight up romance books, but I'm always so happy when romance plots are included, and the ones in this book were pretty sweet. I love a dramatic last chance to confess your feelings moments, and also plenty of LGBT characters as well. I appreciate that all human characters are from different parts of Earth, especially since they were recruited because they were deemed the best. It'd be weird and messed up if they came from all one place. When Tina first gets memories of her past self, she suddenly has knowledge about space, which is convenient. And also, I just really liked it. It saved on awkward questions and explanations and kind of cut to the chase, even if it felt a bit spitball at times. I do feel like I have a pretty good general overview of what this universe looks like. I also like how characters state their pronouns upon meeting. I can't say this is unique to this book, but I am glad to see it's becoming increasingly more popular, particularly in science fiction with aliens, and hopefully might seep into other genres as well. But I did like the use of neo-pronouns in this book specifically. Also, I like that characters ask permission to hug, which seems very minor, but it happens at multiple times throughout the book. And it's a really beautiful show of consent. Even though these characters are friends and have hugged in the past, it's not assumed that touching is allowed, and there's emphasis on a character's comfort, which is just a lesson that needs to be brought into real life as well. As for the villain Morant, this guy generally scared me. Like, I don't remember the last time a villain character caused me to be nervous while reading, especially when they're not a monster and just a person. He has this really freaky power where not only can he kill someone with one touch, but when he does so, it corrupts the memory of that person, so everyone who knew them immediately hates them. Thinks that they're this disgusting, awful person who deserves to have died. That's just so brilliant and evil. It makes mourning the dead nearly impossible, which to me feels like a huge insult to both the departed and the loved one left behind. But also it places these enormous stakes on fighting one-on-one with Morant. Characters are afraid of their loved ones not only getting killed, but suddenly hating their dead loved one. Many characters express they'd rather be mercy killed by a friend than touched by Morant. It makes for some really interesting tension in the story. I'm not a big young adult fan, so I'll admit I wasn't expecting to not like this book, but I was definitely prepared to not like it as much as Anders' other work. However, I was really pleasantly surprised with this book and genuinely eager to continue on with this series. I'm actually a little intimidated because I keep starting series that I know I'm going to want to continue to read, but I personally don't have a great track record of finishing series, like even going all the way back to childhood. Like, how do you not get constantly distracted by shiny new standalones? I didn't read any more of Animorphs this month. I'm reading them via ebook, which isn't my favorite thing to do, and that's definitely hindering my progress in the series. Plus, what books I did read this month just absolutely demanded my full attention. I also was planning on reading one of my other highly anticipated releases this month, but unfortunately I got my pre-order in the mail too close to the end of the month, plus I was just cramming to finish Victories on time. So it's at the top of my TBR for next month. And of course that is The Galaxy and the Ground Within by Becky Chambers. If you've been with me, you know that she is one of my favorite authors ever. And I've already started reading this one, but it's gonna be top of the list for next month. And I'm going to continue to read my 2021 releases, but I think I might need a break from space opera. So after that, I'm thinking Yesterday is History by Kosoko Jackson. And lastly, returning to space opera, Local Star by Amy Ogden. After that, it's a free-for-all for whatever books I have left on my TBR shelf, and there's quite a few to choose from. A couple of events coming up. On May 12th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, I will be hosting a writing sprint on my channel with Jessica from Lady Lovestead Reads and Johara from Seeker Books. Just keep your eyes open for that on my channel if you're interested. And on May 18th, I'll be reading at Space Cowboy Books Virtual as part of their Flash Fiction series. I have a brand new piece I'm writing specifically for this event, and which I am still editing at the time I am filming this video. I'll be joining Gideon Marcus, author of the Keetra series, a book I talked about in my March wrap-up, and Renan Bernardo. The event is free to attend. I've got the link pinned in my Twitter, and I'll drop it below as well for those who are interested. Thanks for watching this video. Let me know how the month of April went for you.